afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim McFeeters here with Post University, and I'm giving you an informative speech on teenage violence and the possible connections to video games. Over the past few years, the growing popularity in all video games, especially in those in the violent and grotesque violent manner, we have a growing concern as a society as to what effect it may be having on today's youth and the long-term effects it may have on them. So today I'm going to be talking to you about 3 different studies, all done from 2014 from 3 separate groups and their works with the kids individually, as well as looking at the possibility of issues on the whole for today's society. Our first study came out in February of 2014 and was done by Sean Coughlan. He had 100 teens between 13 and 14 years of age. They were all frequent video game players, and he had them continue their game time as well as watch the way they interact with each other both during and not during gameplay. More than 50% of the kids involved in the study played games every day for an average of 1 to 3 hours. The majority of those games were violence-based. Many of the teens played non-violent games as well, and during the study they noted there was no different effect on their moral reasoning depending on whether they played a violent or non-violent video game. Where they began to run into issues with the children's moral values was when they played 3 hours a day or more. They said at this point and forward, if the children played even more hours a day of gameplay, whether it was violent or non-violent video games, they were stunted in their growth of quote-unquote right and wrong. Their empathy, trust, and concern for others was greatly lowered and put them at a lower point than any of the other classes, including those that did play violent video games but for shorter periods of time. So the study, in closing, did say that it was a combination of both gameplay and how long they played during an average day, rather than specifically the violent category of the video games. In August 2014, a Dartmouth study showed that aggression is just one of the possible attributes that may be brought out in the teens from playing video games. They concluded that alcohol use, smoking cigarettes, delinquency, risky sex were some of the more common and more dangerous attributes that could be brought out in the kids from playing too many video games. They also noted that it may lead teens to drive recklessly, increase automobile accidents, police stops, willingness to drink and drive. They said it was based a lot on the characters and the type of games they were playing, not specifically bound around violence, but around non-empathetic main characters in the games they were playing. This study consisted of males and females, and they noted that they both reacted similar with little differences between the genders. And this one also tied in that the strongest effect was not based on so much the violent matter in the game, but how often the game was played throughout the day and how many days out of the week they would play the game. So our last study came out in November of 2014 by psychologist Chris Ferguson, who led a team to make a study on the violent video games, and his early study showed that there was no correlation between the violent video games and behavior of the youth. He noted the following chart that showed from 96 to 2004 there was a great rise in the game sales, our vertical numbers here, showing that they nearly doubled in the span of the 8 years. And then they watched the correlation of violent crimes involving youth gradually go down as well. He commented on the video games, saying that they may be used as a scapegoat, quote, distracting society from more pressing concerns such as poverty, education, vocational disparities, and mental health. Our closing points bring us that we've had 2 studies show us that there is possible correlation with video games, but not necessarily of the violent demeanor of the game, rather the amount of time and lack of social gathering the children are getting outside of video game play. And our 3rd study by psychologist Ferguson is saying that there is no correlation with the video games, rather it's being used as a quote-unquote scapegoat for the bigger issues that are not wanted to be tackled politically. With having all this being said, all we can really close on is the old philosophy that it takes more than parents to raise a child, but rather a community. And no matter the issues that's being found with teenage violence, whether it is directly linked back to video games, violent nature, or just too much time on them, it must be tackled as a community and as a whole, rather than on the individual level, because in today's media, there's no way to get children truly clear out of the violence in the media, video games, and movies around us. Here's the references of all of the studies from my presentation today. I hope you found it informative, and thank you for listening. Have a good night.